Crime and Punishment is a novel that has captured the hearts and minds of readers since its publication in 1866. The novel follows the story of a young man named Rodion Raskolnikov, who, in a state of hypochondria and poverty, decides to murder an elderly pawnbroker. However, the book is not just about the crime itself, but rather about the psychological and philosophical implications that follow. One of the primary themes explored in the novel is the idea of the extraordinary man. Raskolnikov believes himself to be one of these extraordinary individuals, who is above the law and has the right to commit murder for the greater good. This belief is rooted in the philosophy of nihilism and utilitarianism, which were popular in Russia during the 19th century. However, as the novel progresses, Raskolnikov is forced to confront the consequences of his actions, both externally and internally. The guilt and the weight of his crime lead to a downward spiral of psychological turmoil, ultimately leading to his confession and imprisonment. Through the character of Raskolnikov, Dostoyevsky explores the complexities of the human psyche and the consequences of acting on one's beliefs, no matter how noble they may seem. The novel also touches on themes such as poverty, morality, and redemption. Crime and Punishment is not just a work of fiction, it has had a significant impact on literature and philosophy. It has influenced many writers, including Anton Chekhov, Franz Kafka, and Virginia Woolf, and continues to be studied and analyzed by scholars and students alike. In conclusion, Crime and Punishment is a masterpiece of Russian literature that delves into the complexities of the human psyche and the consequences of one's actions. It is a must-read for anyone interested in literature, philosophy, or psychology, and its impact continues to be felt today. Chapter 1. An analysis of Raskolnikov's character. In Fyodor Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, the character of Rodion Raskolnikov is a complex and multifaceted one. Through his thoughts and actions, we see a man torn between different aspects of his nature, and we witness the different forces that have shaped his behavior. Raskolnikov's character is characterized by a dichotomy between ruthlessness and empathy. On one hand, he has a cold, prideful nature and is planning a terrible deed that remains unnamed. On the other hand, he is capable of great kindness and empathy, as evidenced by his act of giving money to the impoverished Marmeladov. Another aspect of Raskolnikov's character is his isolation, which has plunged him into deep thoughts and theories, causing him to lose touch with the physical world. His poverty, small apartment, and the oppressive city environment have further contributed to his psychological state of mind. Dostoyevsky believed that the city environment had a noxious effect on the soul, and Raskolnikov's character reflects this sentiment. Raskolnikov's philosophy regarding cowardice and taking bold new steps is also a significant aspect of his character. He believes that humanity's greatest obstacle is cowardice, and people must be courageous enough to take new steps and utter new words. Perhaps he sees himself as one of these people, justifying his actions as necessary for a greater good. In conclusion, the character of Rodion Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment is a complex and multifaceted one. Through his thoughts and actions, we see a man torn between different aspects of his nature, and we witness the different forces that have shaped his behavior. Chapter 2. Raskolnikov's Descent into Murder. In Fyodor Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, the protagonist Raskolnikov's descent into murder is portrayed in a hauntingly vivid manner. After contemplating the idea of murdering an old pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, for her money, Raskolnikov finally carries out the deed with an axe he stole from his apartment building's kitchen. The scene of the murder is chilling, as Raskolnikov strikes Alyona from behind, allowing him to do it almost mechanically, devoid of any emotional attachment. This contrasts sharply with the murder of Alyona's sister, Lizaveta, whom Raskolnikov kills in a panic after she unexpectedly walks in on him. Unlike Alyona, Lizaveta is killed head-on, and Raskolnikov is forced to look into her eyes as he strikes her with the axe. This second murder marks a turning point for Raskolnikov, as he realizes the magnitude of what he has done and the innocence of the victim. Throughout the novel, Raskolnikov's internal struggle between his compassionate and murderous sides is portrayed through a haunting dream sequence in which he sees a cruel peasant, Mikolka, beating a horse to death while a young Raskolnikov tries to stop him. Dostoyevsky's portrayal of Raskolnikov's descent into murder is a powerful exploration of the human psyche and the consequences of our actions. It serves as a warning against the dangerous path of justifying immoral acts for a supposed greater good. Chapter 3. The Psychological Fallout of Murder, Raskolnikov's Descent into Isolation and Madness. In Fyodor Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, the character Raskolnikov commits a brutal murder and is forced to grapple with the psychological consequences of his actions. This passage describes the night following the murder and the subsequent events that lead Raskolnikov further down a path of isolation and madness. As dawn breaks, Raskolnikov becomes feverish as he realizes the full extent of what he has done. His inability to cover up the crime and his erratic behavior in the police station highlight the psychological turmoil he is experiencing. He feels alienated from society and wonders if his punishment has already begun. Razumihin, a character whose name means reason, represents the potential for Raskolnikov to re-engage with society and to choose pro-social behavior. Despite Raskolnikov's initial resistance, he is drawn to Razumihin's kindness and intelligence. This is in stark contrast to Raskolnikov's increasing isolation and descent into madness. The passage illustrates the psychological fallout of committing a heinous crime. Raskolnikov's isolation and separation from society are palpable and suggest that the psychological consequences of such acts are just as significant as the physical ones. The role of Razumihin as a source of reason and potential for Raskolnikov's re-engagement with society is also highlighted, suggesting that a strong social support system can be a powerful deterrent against committing violent acts. Chapter 4. Raskolnikov's Search for Redemption. In this section of Crime and Punishment, we see Raskolnikov struggling to cope with the guilt and consequences of his actions. After waking up from his delirium, he begins to exhibit classic criminal behaviors of semi-confessing and returning to the scene of the crime, but ultimately falls short of actually turning himself in. Instead, he seeks redemption through his behavior with the Marmeladovs, offering them money for a funeral and feeling a sense of self-satisfaction. However, Raskolnikov knows deep down that this is not enough to truly atone for his sins. The introduction of Sonia, Marmeladov's daughter, is significant as well. Despite being a prostitute, she is named Sophia, meaning wisdom, and will ultimately play a crucial role in leading Raskolnikov to salvation. Through Raskolnikov's search for redemption and the introduction of Sonia, Crime and Punishment explores complex themes of guilt, morality, and the possibility of redemption. Chapter 5. The Danger of Nihilism and the Concept of the Extraordinary Man. In Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, the protagonist Raskolnikov espouses a theory of the extraordinary man, who is above the law and has the right to commit crimes if it serves a greater good. This idea closely resembles Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or Superman, who is able to create his own morality. Both thinkers explore the dangers of nihilism, which rejects objective moral truths and traditional societal bonds. Dostoyevsky believed that nihilism was dangerous because it could lead to a moral crisis in which individuals could use utilitarian arguments to justify anything, including murder. Nietzsche saw nihilism as a crisis that would ultimately lead to the emergence of the Übermensch, who would create his own morality and save humanity from the crisis. However, for Dostoyevsky, Raskolnikov's belief in the extraordinary man is a dangerous mistake. Raskolnikov neglects his own human nature and innate conscience, believing that he can act based on logic alone and prove himself extraordinary. His emotional turmoil, however, suggests otherwise. Dostoyevsky highlights the importance of moral boundaries and the consequences of violating them. In conclusion, the concept of the extraordinary man and Nietzsche's Übermensch are important philosophical ideas explored in Crime and Punishment. Dostoyevsky's negative portrayal of Raskolnikov serves as a warning against the dangers of nihilism and the importance of moral values. Chapter 6. Sonia and Raskolnikov, the Archetypes of Virtue and Suffering. Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment features Sonia, a prostitute who is portrayed as the most virtuous character in the novel. Sonia's compassion extends beyond her family and to Raskolnikov, who confesses to her that he is a murderer. Despite Raskolnikov's lack of faith, Sonia's faith in God remains unwavering. Sonia represents the archetype of the saintly prostitute, a common motif in Dostoyevsky's works. She embodies the unjustness of fate and the suffering of all humanity. Despite being a prostitute, Sonia is seen as more virtuous than other characters in the novel, as she sacrifices herself for the good of her family and even for Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov, on the other hand, represents the archetype of the fallen man who must suffer the consequences of his actions. His twisted, utilitarian ideology has led him to commit murder, and he must grapple with the guilt and shame that come with it. Despite their differences, Sonia and Raskolnikov share a kinship as people who have fallen in different ways and must suffer. The Story of Lazarus, which Sonia reads to Raskolnikov, suggests that they can each rise once again. Sonia's unwavering faith in God and her willingness to suffer alongside Raskolnikov offer hope for redemption and forgiveness. In conclusion, Sonia and Raskolnikov represent archetypes of virtue and suffering in Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment. Through their shared experiences of falling and suffering, they offer hope for redemption and the possibility of rising again. Chapter 7: The Redemption of Raskolnikov. In Fyodor Dostoyevsky's novel Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov, a former student in St. Petersburg, commits a double murder and tries to justify his actions based on his belief in the superiority of certain individuals. However, as the story progresses, Raskolnikov's guilt consumes him, and he realizes that he cannot escape punishment for his crimes. After deciding to confess, Raskolnikov embarks on a farewell tour and visits his mother, sister, and Sonia, a young woman who he has grown close to. Along the way, he retrieves his cross and says a prayer with Sonia, an act that will later prove significant in his redemption. At the police station, Raskolnikov almost backs out of confessing, but Sonia's presence gives him the courage to do so publicly, in front of God and humanity. He is sentenced to imprisonment in Siberia, where he is isolated from the rest of society and left to ponder the consequences of his actions. During his time in prison, Sonia visits Raskolnikov outside his window, and their relationship deepens. Eventually, they are able to meet outside, and Raskolnikov finally realizes the depth of his love for her. This moment marks the beginning of his redemption, as he shifts his faith from his theories to God and begins to understand the true nature of his actions. In Siberia, Raskolnikov is forced to confront his guilt and the consequences of his crimes. The harsh environment provides a contrast to the crowded city of St. Petersburg, giving him a chance to break free from his thoughts and reflect on his actions. With Sonia's help, he begins to understand the importance of confessing his sins and accepting punishment, not just from the law, but from God and humanity. Overall, Dostoyevsky's portrayal of Raskolnikov's journey towards redemption shows the importance of accepting responsibility for one's actions and seeking forgiveness. Through Raskolnikov's experiences, the novel emphasizes the power of love and faith in helping individuals overcome their past mistakes and find a path towards a better future. Summary: a young man named Rodion Raskolnikov comes to the realization that he must kill an elderly pawnbroker. He believes this will prove that he is an exceptional person, superior to the rest of humanity. Using an axe, Raskolnikov murders the pawnbroker, but is unexpectedly interrupted by her sister and forced to kill her too. While this crime occurs early in the novel, the remaining 600 pages focus on the punishment. Raskolnikov grapples with the psychological aftermath of the murders, including delirium, semi-insanity, and a deep sense of isolation. Eventually, Raskolnikov is encouraged by Sonia, a virtuous prostitute, to confess to his crimes. The novel concludes with Raskolnikov going to a Siberian prison and experiencing a moment of divine grace, the beginning of his redemption. Now, thank you for taking the time to watch, and if you found value in this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. And in case you want to buy the book, use the link in the description. Trust me, you won't regret it.